This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stockbox interview.
We're good to go. Hello and welcome. Joining us today is Joshua Barch, Director and CEO of Mydecine, listed on OTC with the ticket MYCOF. How are you, Josh?
I am very good, thank you.
Good. Can you briefly introduce the company? Who are Mydecine and what are they trying to do?
Sure. So Mydecine Innovations Group is a biotechnology company. And what we're focused on is first and second generation novel therapeutics, utilizing different psychedelic molecules to treat various indications, but more specifically, addiction as well as PTSD. Additionally, I'd like to highlight, we are traded on the OTC markets with MYCOF. We are also traded on the NEO exchange in Canada under the ticker MYCO.
What is the difference between first and second generation therapeutics?
Sure. So we look at first generation, and what we classify as first generation would be MYCO-001 is what we call it. So there's a single molecule of psilocybin. But more broadly speaking, first generation is molecules that have been studied and used and are naturally in nature, such as DMT, 5-MeO DMT, and then also other molecules like MDMA, things that have been around for a significant amount of time, have been in the clinic for a significant amount of time, and obviously in various recreational settings as well. The second generation, we're looking at basically taking the first generation of molecules, so in our case, psilocybin and MDMA, as kind of a blueprint, right? So both of those molecules have shown significant efficacy for the treatment of various indications, but there's known kind of limitations to them, if you will, or imperfections, if you will, as it pertains to medical use. So for instance, psilocybin and MDMA have extremely long half-lives, and how that translates into kind of existing medical infrastructure is it requires a very unique infrastructure in order to provide this type of treatment, because the treatment duration for a single dosing session can be upwards of 10, 11, 12 hours, right? So it's like running a marathon. So in order to improve that and to really increase scalability, increase kind of the patient equity side of things, so you can really treat a large number of patients suffering from a variety of indications, you need to control a lot of those kind of imperfections. So being able to reduce the half-life from 6 to 8 hours down to 1 to 2 hours, increase onset time, look at tailoring the molecule to eliminate some of the nausea associated, the anxiety associated. All of these are fixable at the molecular level, but that's what we're doing in kind of the second generation of the NCE program, so the new chemical entity program.
And can you give us an overview of the vertically integrated three-pronged approach that Mydecine takes?
Yeah, sure. So Mydecine really kind of from the onset has looked at what is the most efficient way to not only develop, but also provide these treatments at scale. And we've identified that, fragmenting development of drugs can be expensive, inefficient, and very, ultimately time consuming. So what we've done is really wanting to control every vertical of the development process, the supply chain, as well as the actual administration, looking at ways that we can participate in that as well. So starting with the drug development portion, we have partnered with Applied Pharmaceutical Innovation. Applied Pharmaceutical Innovation is a not-for-profit drug development organization that operates out of the University of Alberta, that essentially acts as a stand-between or a conduit between private sector companies, so in our case, obviously Mydecine, and the University of Alberta, allowing the company side to retain 100% ownership of all of the IP. However, that company, in our case, again, Mydecine, we have exclusive access to both the physical infrastructure at the university, which is ranked top 15 in the world for drug development, top 3 in the world for artificial intelligence drug development, as well as the human capital that exists there, right? So these are world-class individuals with hundreds of collective years of drug development expertise from a variety of different backgrounds. So to build that kind of capability in-house would cost tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. We're able to do that with an exclusive partnership. Once the drug is made and it's shipped out to our clinical trial sites, we want to be able to increase efficiency. So we developed a telehealth platform that specifically is tailored around remotely administering the therapy aspects of the different treatments. So when you're looking at something that's unique to psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, is in the name, it's psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So the vast majority of the man hours and the protocols are not under any influence. They're one-on-one interactions with the therapist, both pre and post, either the therapist or clinician, both pre and post. And it's incredibly important, but it's limited to scalability issues because it's not viable to expect people to travel extended amounts of distance multiple times a month to meet with their therapist one-on-one that's qualified to provide this treatment. So we developed an HD telehealth platform that's HIPAA compliant, that aggregates trained professionals. Now we have over 150 on the actual platform, utilizing that and providing the psychedelic integration aspect of the treatment remotely, which obviously vastly increases the scalability.
What would you say is the market opportunity for this class of treatments using psychedelics to treat addiction?
Yeah, I think the way to do that, and there's figures that have been thrown around in excess of 100 billion. And I think the way that is makes the most sense to me, at least, as to how do you really look at the marketplace is what are we disrupting and what are we changing? For us, for instance, we're looking at our MYCO 001 initially for smoking cessation and the efficacy rates that are coming out of our smoking cessation studies that have been done. This is a partnership with Johns Hopkins. Hopkins and Dr. Matt Johnson, our lead PI, has been running studies on a variety of different indications for psychedelics, but for smoking cessation specifically, you're looking at efficacy rates at 12 months in excess of 59-60%, at 6 months in excess of 80%. Right? And this is on a single dosing session with therapy outlining that. If you compare that to what's available in the space, Chantix, which is actually recently just recalled off the shelf globally, it's a Pfizer drug, 1.2 billion in global sales on Chantix, 12-month efficacy rates are in the single digits. Okay. And again, it was just recalled for a cancer-causing carcinogen in the drug. So it's incredibly dangerous, incredibly ineffective. And it's still a blockbuster drug, right? 1.2 billion in annual revenue globally, 900 million in the United States. So you're looking at a smoking cessation market. Smoking kills 1 in 5 people in the United States alone, right? That's 480,000 people. You have over 30 million people in the United States alone actively smoking. It's a massive problem. All the other addiction combined, there's a little blip on what smoking is killing, but there's not a single good solution. Ours is a single dosing session with therapy outlining it, and we're showing incredible efficacy rates, an incredibly safe drug, and they're durable. You never seen durability like this. At 2.5 years, we're still showing 60%. It flatlines, it remains. So you're fundamentally solving the problem at the actual root of the addiction, as opposed to using something to essentially suppress cravings.
Do you think that Mydecine could, in the future, treat other forms of addiction besides smoking or PTSD?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. If you look at kind of our second generation, we've already started to work on that and more broadly looked at substance use disorder. But some of the work that's coming out of University of Madison, Wisconsin, out of NYU, there's alcohol use disorder studies that are showing literally 80% complete abstinence rates from alcohol after 1 or 2 or 3 doses of these drugs. If you look at kind of something that's really interesting. So the founder of Alcohol Anonymous was convinced openly that LSD was the ultimate drug that was incredibly effective and was the kind of, gold standard of what should be used to cure addiction. Because again, it's changing your way fundamentally that your brain perceives these different substances. You're dealing with the root of the problem as opposed to suppressing. So in perpetuity, you're constantly looking, and that's not just true for smoking. Smoking is kind of a really unique addiction, because you have people that are traditionally healthy outside of their smoking habit, right? They live normal lives. It's not ruining their family. It's not ruining them financially. You don't see that same thing with other addictions. Obviously, cocaine, opioid addiction, alcohol. There's other extenuating, issues that come with those addictions. So we know if we can solve it in smoking, that there's a very high likelihood that we can also solve it in probably more motivated populations for sure. But again, the answer to your question is yes, we think this is just the tip of the iceberg, and we absolutely intend on label expanding that as well with kind of IIT smaller run studies.
Could you tell us about a recent exciting meeting with the FDA?
Yeah, sure. So we've been working on our upcoming study for a long time with Hopkins. And again, we basically partnered with Hopkins, looked at taking the incredible work that they've done over the last decade on smoking cessation, and most recently the NIDA grant that was approved and provided to the Hopkins team, which is the first time in 50 years that the federal government has stepped in and actually provided funding for psychedelics for a therapeutic use, which is obviously a huge confidence booster, showing that the government is also taking the same position, and has also spent a significant amount of time reviewing the data, and they're very excited about it. And unequivocally across the board, the FDA came with very positive feedback for our study. So it was a huge win for the team. It was a huge confidence booster. For us, Mydecine, we're a relatively small cap company, especially when you look at kind of our assets, where we're at with clinical trials. When the IND is cleared, which we expect in the very near term, where our data set for the IND will be done hopefully by the end of this month and being submitted shortly thereafter, looking at like mid-April, hopefully, to submit that. The FDA has 30 days to clear that. Once that's cleared, we're one of, I believe, 4 companies or organizations in psychedelics that has a 2B study of any type for psychedelics. The others are MindMed, Compass, and MAPS. MindMed, Compass are billion-dollar market caps. We're 35 million Canadian. You know what I mean? So the upside, I think, on our stock is far beyond any other stock that I'm aware of in psychedelics by far. And it's incredibly de-risked because our data set is so supportive, and we're working with the number one institution in psychedelics. So, we're incredibly undervalued right now. And obviously that meeting was a huge confidence booster for us. And I think that, upon submitting this IND in the very near term, as well as submitting for breakthrough therapy status, you're going to see a massive kind of sea change, the way that Mydecine is perceived kind of by the market as a whole.
Looking forward, what are some of the risks Mydecine faces, do you think, and how are you working to address these challenges?
Of course, there's a stigma around these treatments, right? Because they've been negatively portrayed in a recreational context for decades. You always run the risk of having that kind of resurface, right? You saw it happen in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, where irresponsible people got a hold of the drugs, and it wasn't regulated, it wasn't controlled enough. And it had an incredible adverse effect where they were, essentially halted all of the incredible research that was being done for multiple decades, which is that's just a problem. And it's a problem, and it exists. But I think now you've never seen this type of investments being made, as well as the world-class institutions that are being involved. So what we're doing to mitigate that is we take a very, very strict stance. We don't support recreational use of any psychedelics at all. These are incredibly effective if they are given by credentialed individuals in the proper set and setting. So in a clinic and a controlled environment. So that's the first thing. The other aspect that we've really kind of focused on is partnering with world-class institutions that really validates the work and that we know is going to be done incredibly responsibly. So Johns Hopkins University, Leiden University, Imperial College of London, Macquarie University, University of Maryland, all of these are partners, University of Alberta, all of these are partners, with Mydecine on different initiatives. These are world-class institutions that do incredibly good work and are very well respected. And we think that, to really kind of shift the public perception, not only on the individual basis, but also from the top down governmental level, it's really important that you're working with well-respected institutions. And it's something that we take very seriously.
Well, that's all we have time for. But just as a takeaway, can you give a 3-point summary to investors of why they should invest in Mydecine?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've covered a lot of them throughout, but I'll kind of reiterate. One, I think that if you look at the potential of our drug and the efficacy coming out of the studies that are publicly available and published from MYCO-001 on smoking cessation, you're tackling a industry projected to be valued at $64 billion by 2026 with not a single good drug. And we're presenting an incredibly safe and effective drug to be able to take a significant portion of that market share. In the fairly new, the relatively near term, we think we'll have that drug on the market by beginning of 2024, potentially. So it de-risks because, again, there's a very high likelihood that we see success with that drug. If we are successful with that drug, that $35 million market cap is going to be in excess of $1 billion for sure. So there's a massive upside there. Second, you're looking at the team, that's behind us. We've assembled, bar none, I think, one of the top 2 or 3 teams in psychedelics, but it's something that could rival other serious drug development companies. I mean, we have hundreds of years of FDA, medicinal chemistry, drug development experience on our team. And these are people that are responsible for some of the most groundbreaking inventions in drugs to date. So, it's really important to focus on, okay, they have a good idea, but what is the credentials that make them available or able to capitalize on that? I think that we've done an incredible job on that. And then last is kind of our tiered approach, right? We de-risk it with the first generation of drug, which we should have on market, one of the first in psychedelics to have a drug approved. And we have an incredible second generation that has a huge blue sky on improving those drugs, an expanding IP portfolio that's really bulletproof, and we're really proud of it. So, collectively, I think those 3 points is something that really sets Mydecine apart from the other competitors in the space and makes it an incredibly compelling investment opportunity.
Josh, thanks very much for answering our questions. That was Joshua Barch, CEO and Director of Mydecine.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.